The Phoenix, a mythical creature that rises from its own ashes. A trick that the Bottom family was able to pull off with surprising regularity. They had fled their home, escaped the draft, and emerged from the South American wilderness without a single peso to their name. They fought with the press, received awards, and suffered losses. The Bottoms left a religious cult and conquered Hollywood. But first, they changed their last name. They named themselves after a fiery bird that is always reborn, no matter what happens. At the center of this story is the shy younger brother of a superstar, Johnny Cash's favorite fan, a rapper, and of course, the Oscar-winning Joker, Joaquin Phoenix. The story of Joaquin Phoenix begins far from the capital of world cinema and long before his birth. Let's talk about his parents first. Arlene Dunitz grew up in a typical Jewish family from the Bronx. Her ancestors had emigrated from Hungary and did everything they could to ensure that a more prosperous, albeit tedious, life awaited their children. No sooner had Arlene graduated from high school than she was married off to a wealthy partner and given a job as a secretary in a local office that only differed from the hundreds of others by the interior of its lobby. Well, it only took a couple of months for that interior to get boring, as did the monotony of everyday life as an exemplary wife. The spirit of defiance smoldered in the young woman's heart, and the freedom of the 60s was a wind fanning the flame. Then one day, perhaps on an unremarkable Tuesday, Thursday, or even a Saturday, she left home forever. The streets were teeming with thousands of hippies, and Arlene was easily lost in the crowd. Behind her were the evening parties, a 9-to-5 job, and her husband, and ahead was the road to California, a place that was ever eager to adopt a newborn flower child. The younger woman hitchhiked her way across half of the United States before meeting her first love. When John Bottom stopped to pick Arlene up on the side of the road, he had no idea that it was his future wife climbing into his pickup truck. Like his passenger, John was running from the horrors of the past, a life as an orphan, a failed marriage, and the military draft. Together they hid from their memories along the Pacific coast. Life was full of beaches, sun, marijuana, LSD, and nomadic hippie communes. John and Arlene got married in one of these communities. 2 years later, on the floor of a small shack where dozens of other community members were huddled, their first child, River, was born. The Bottoms were traveling all over America at the time. They worked on farms in California, roamed around New Mexico, and met a charming bunch of missionaries in Texas. These young people didn't use drugs at all and encouraged the Bottoms to join their new religious group.
The system's nothing, it's just not worth living for. There's love here, there's nothing out there. So let's get it together and show them.
Arlene and John found inner freedom and peace in the teachings of David Berg, who in a couple of years would start calling himself Moses David. In early 1973, they joined the Children of God. In a gated ranch commune called the Texas Soul Clinic, Rain came into the world as the newest member of the Bottom family. She was named after the rainy day on which she was born. Young River was attending what was the equivalent of Sunday school, where teachers talked about the final judgment, the burning of sinners, and the Antichrist who would torment little American children who disobeyed Moses David. During this period, the child's parents had been steadily moving up the hierarchical ladder of the community, and in 1974, John was promoted to be the Archbishop of Venezuela. The title was grandiose, but in reality, it meant that the family would have to move to South America at their own expense and spread the teachings of the children of God there in search for more followers and money. Although the move was difficult, the Bottoms were lucky. They left the commune before Berg became a violent cult leader. Over the next 20 years, his followers would be convicted of both physical and sexual abuse towards women and children, and Moses David and his inner circle would be sentenced to life in prison. However, this doesn't stop the children of God from continuing to preach and recruit new members into their ranks. But back to the Bottoms. On the way to Venezuela, they stopped in Puerto Rico, where Joaquin Raphael was born on October the 28th, 1974. A few weeks later, she takes me to the doctor. He sees me and says, "Who did this hair lip operation? That's the best operation I've ever seen." Mum said, "No one. He wasn't born with a hair lip. I was just born with the scar." The birth of Joaquin anchored the family to the poor streets of San Juan. Poverty existed side by side with stunning beaches and lush nature, where the child spent his days watching his father. John Bottom eked out a living as a gardener by taking care of the lawns of wealthy estates or cleaning the pools. Upon finally reaching Caracas, the family grew once again. A second daughter was born and was given the name Liberty Butterfly. John, Arlen, River, Rain, Joaquin, and Liberty all lived together in a run-down shack with no water or amenities. According to the precepts of the Children of God, who used children to collect alms, every weekend the young Bottoms would play in La Candelaria Square. The eldest son had learned a couple of chords from local musician Alfonso Sanz, who gave the boy his first guitar. The fair-haired Ninos quickly became famous among the locals. The trip to another continent dragged on, and the cult's new doctrines became more frightening and repulsive. Rumors about David Berg's sexual perversion and financial fraud often reached his followers. Police had been searching for him for the past 7 years, and the Bottoms were beginning to believe that the charges against him were justified. In 1978, Arlen and John finally left the Children of God.
The whole family showed up at my doorstep one day at the church saying that they'd kind of gone into a faith crisis, that they weren't comfortable in the Children of God anymore, and they wanted to leave.
A missionary priest they knew put them on a fishing boat bound for Florida. The captain provided the Bottoms with a tiny cabin on board, and in return, River and Rain would perform for the crew every night. Joaquin remembered the good-natured sailors, the ocean breeze, and tropical islands, but seeing the sailors hard at work just once was all it took for the boy to cross off for life at sea from his list of aspirations. One day, he ran out on deck as the fishermen were hauling in their catching nets. Joaquin looked on in horror as the suffocating prey were killed by the men with measured blows against the wall. It was our first concrete experience seeing what happens to food before it gets on the table, and we decided never again to eat anything that had once breathed. At the end of the year, the ship docked off the coast of Florida, and the Bottoms set foot on their native land as vegetarians. Finally, back in the US, the family went to visit Arlen's parents, who met their grandchildren and son-in-law for the first time. Joseph and Marjorie Dunnetts had retired and moved to a quiet seaside town, and there they housed the Bottom family, which gained another member. On December the 10th, 1978, Summer Joy Phoenix was born. After a couple of months, John got a job as a gardener in the house of Alfonso Sanz, the same musician who had given River his guitar. He settled the Bottoms in the steward's house next to his estate. For the ever-roaming family, a couple of bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen felt like a palace. The children went to an ordinary school for the first time, and in their free time helped their father take care of the plants. But alas, the fairy tale didn't last long. John injured his back and lost his job, once again causing the Bottoms to turn to their gifted children. The following year, River, Rain, Joaquin, and Liberty won every single talent show in the state of Florida. The quartet's charm was put on the assembly line, and soon the Phoenix's ambitions began to outgrow the southern state. It was during this time they changed their surname. Just as they had done 10 years before, they were leaving their past behind. The wandering cults and poverty went up in flames, and from the ashes, a bright and happy future emerged. Arlene collected newspaper clippings about the children and sent them to a former classmate, actress Penny Marshall. The portfolio impressed several Paramount employees who invited the family to Los Angeles to meet and talk more, while also emphasizing that a simple sit-down would hardly be worth the long trip. The Phoenixes ignored the latter sentiment, sold all of their belongings, loaded their children into a broken-down Volkswagen van, and set off on a 3,000-mile journey. We had the vision that our kids could captivate the world. Hey, do you like our work? Let us know with your like and comment. Push that subscribe button and share with your friends. If you want to support the project financially, become our sponsor on Patreon or YouTube sponsorship. Thank you. Let's move on. Alas, the meeting in Los Angeles was underwhelming. The Dream Factory gave the Phoenixes the typical, "We'll call you back," a phrase which only the staunchest of optimists could find promising. The Bottoms had run out of money on their way to LA, and knocking on studio doors wasn't going to fill the bellies of their 5 children. But Arlene still believed. She tapped into the skills of her youth and got a job at NBC as a casting secretary for producer Joel Thurm. Mrs. Phoenix had a plan. Infiltrate the Hollywood machine, network with the right people, and set her children up for success. Perhaps too simple of a plan, but it worked. After a series of meaningful handshakes, Arlene found herself at the door of Iris Burton's office. The legendary Iris Burton, as she called herself, year after year made the list of the most influential people in the film industry. Every talented child who has appeared in commercials or on TV since the early 1980s has worked with Burton. Over a 30-year career, she had introduced the world to Fred Savage, Kirsten Dunst, the Olsen sisters, and Josh Hartnett. Iris liked the Phoenix clan too. Arlene was equally as pleased at their meeting. Up until that point, rare negotiations with agents had only ever hinted at the prospect of giving River a shot, but Iris promised to give each child the opportunity to work in Hollywood. She wasn't even bothered by the family's vegetarianism and refusal to participate in advertising meat products, which ruled out about 80% of potential contracts for their new clients. The family signed a deal with Iris, but after a full year of working together, she had only managed to set up a couple of auditions. The Phoenixes received their first performing fees at grand openings of shopping centers and city holidays.
Gonna make it, gonna make it, gonna make it.
In one of his rare auditions, River took a chance and landed the leading role in a TV series called 7 Brides for 7 Brothers.
Hey, thanks. Then I don't have to worry.
The musical drama told the story of a restless family living in the wilderness with no parents. This remake of a classic musical was broadcast on CBS for just 2 years, but 24 episodes was enough to reveal the potential of the eldest Phoenix. 1 week after airing the pilot episode, the studio's mailbox became inundated with fan mail. All letters for River. His parents forced him to personally respond to each fan.
What do you mean?
River's success opened the doors for younger members of the family. While shooting the show's Christmas episode, the casting director needed 2 children, and instead of setting up a casting call, Joaquin and Liberty, who'd been on set every day of filming, were invited to appear on screen.
Come on, what are you guys doing?
Sweetheart.
In the end credits, Joaquin was credited as Leaf Phoenix. The boy didn't like that he was the only one of his brothers and sisters to have a so-called boring name, so he came up with a nickname of his own, one that would stick with him for the next 15 years. His TV appearance helped Leaf land a couple of small roles before teaming up with his brother again.
How about if I tell you a story?
They starred together in an ABC educational special about dyslexia.
Okay, read that sign. Danger. No admittance.
Later roles in The Fall Guy, Hill Street Blues, and Anything for Love helped Leaf adapt to the acting profession and win auditions more often. He shared screen time with his sister Summer on the set of Murder, She Wrote. They played the niece and nephew of Jessica Fletcher, who investigates a crime in the middle of an amusement park.
Oh, please, no!
When the episode aired, the whole family laughed at how Leaf's character asks for his favorite burger.
Gee, Aunt Jess, I sure hate to see that other hamburger go to waste.
I'll just bet you would.
Of course, the burger was just a prop. The boy was not forced to eat meat.
What happened?
Nothing, dear. They were just playing a big joke.
1986 was a landmark year for the Phoenix family. River was on the cover of magazines thanks to the success of Stand By Me and The Mosquito Coast. Rain changed her name to Rainbow and made her TV debut, while Leaf landed his first role in a real movie. Space Camp tells about a group of boys who attend NASA's summer space camp and accidentally launch themselves into orbit. Director Harry Weiner approached Iris Burton about finding a child who could make audiences believe that he was obsessed with Star Wars.
May the Force be with you.
During filming, Phoenix was taken under the wing of his older co-stars and easily took on any task he was given on screen. The only exception was the zero-gravity scene in which Leaf was suspended 40 feet in the air on a cable. He was terrified, and so the money counter's are counting money. The production manager is counting time, and I'm just trying to talk to this sweet boy to try to convince him and give him the courage to fly 40 feet in the air and have some fun with it, to see the wonders of space for the first time, you know. But every time I spoke to him, he'd just break down in abject tears. It just so happened that River turned up on set that day, and so it was at this very moment that River came over. River stands up. He's done having a little chat with his brother. Leaf looks over at me with some sense of determination. I say, "Are you ready?" He nods, and boom, he's lifted 40 feet off the stage floor and gives us the shot we need and want, and delivers it beautifully without another tear shed.
No way!
Space Camp turned out to be a sweet, touching, and slightly silly movie. A winning combination for a family hit.
All right!
However, the film met a crushing defeat at the box office. The film hit the big screen just 5 months after the Challenger shuttle disaster. As screen critic Roger Ebert said, it wasn't the right time for a comedy thriller about a group of kids who accidentally go into orbit with a teacher. It was no longer appropriate. The following year, Leaf landed another lead role.
Drop your weapon, Americanids.
Russians! They landed on the beach!
It was a peace-loving tale of 3 teenagers who befriend a Soviet sailor during the Cold War. The film poked fun of the prejudice and paranoia that had gripped American society.
Is American imperialism threatens world peace?
Wrong, Ivan. It's a relentless Soviet obsession for world domination.
Critics were impressed with the film and the caliber of its child actors.
That's great. That's cool. That's my favorite one.
That's the best right there.
The media predicted a bright career ahead of Leaf, just like his older brother, comparing his recent success with that of Stand By Me. During this time, River had already starred in a string of teen films and also landed the role of young Indiana Jones in the 3rd installment of Steven Spielberg's adventure saga. The Phoenixes gradually became all the rage in Hollywood, but that didn't sit well with the head of the family. John believed that filming had a negative effect on children, so towards the end of 1987, he moved the family away from Los Angeles. He purchased a modest estate in Florida, where everyone except for River moved. Now Leaf had to travel across the country to audition for something. It didn't happen often. Over the course of 2 years, he only features in a couple of TV series and a TV movie called Secret Witness. But in 1989, Leaf wins the hearts of film critics once again. As soon as he enters the frame, it's obvious how the young man's dramatic talent is rapidly developing. Phoenix reveals new facets of his craft in his performance with Diane Wiest.
Kind of.
The scene of the phone conversation is carried by his ability to harness true emotion, welling up with tears as he does so.
Okay.
It was clear that Leaf felt much more at home portraying a troubled teen than an innocent cutie. His co-stars also helped him. Aside from Weast, the film features newcomers like Keanu Reeves and Martha Plimpton, who had been dating River for a couple of years. Comedy masters Steve Martin and Rick Moranis also star in the film. Parenthood was another notch on director Ron Howard's belt, earning over $100 million at the box office. The film's success and frequent mentions in the press instilled faith in Phoenix and marked the beginning of a meteoric rise in his career.
Looking hot. Looking damn hot.
The young man never expected that playing the role of Gary would typecast him. Leaf returned to Florida, hoping that scripts for major productions would start rolling in, but all he got were more mediocre screenplays about troubled teens. After a year of Phoenix tossing them straight into the trash, he stopped receiving them altogether. During this time, John and Arlene had begun to drift apart. The family moved to Costa Rica, where River had recently bought some property. Leaf went to John, but after a couple of months, he returned to Los Angeles. During his forays into the capital of world cinema, he attacked auditions. Phoenix's agent later recalled how the young actor was passed over for Scent of a Woman and lost to Leo DiCaprio on auditions for This Boy's Life. Then he and his older brother lost the leading roles for What's Eating Gilbert Grape to Leonardo and Johnny Depp. River was also having a streak of bad luck. After My Own Private Idaho, the most popular of the Phoenixes changed. His next film would capture a shadow of his formerly energetic personality. Producers bombarded Iris Burton with complaints about the actor. He was burning through takes and he'd seemingly forgotten how to talk. Box office performances of the melodrama The Thing Called Love brought with it scathing critics of River.
Well, that's a fine point to make. Thank you.
His career was plummeting, but his agent saw the role of a journalist in An Interview with a Vampire as a lifeboat. A film with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt would tell Hollywood that Phoenix was fine and ready to reach new heights in his career. Then he went to a nightclub called the Viper Room, which became a tragic testament to the dangers of drugs. On October the 30th, 1993, Leaf and Rain came to visit their brother. The night he died, we were together, and he was just playing the guitar. He wanted to show me a new song, wanted to just go home and hang out, play the guitar. I was the one who wanted to go out, and he just came because he was making sure I was taken care of. No one knows for sure what happened at the club that night. First responders found the actor unconscious at the main entrance. River died of an overdose at the hospital.
This is a Fox News update. The film world is mourning two deaths, actor River Phoenix and director Federico Fellini.
Mystery still surrounds the death of River Phoenix.
It's 7:33 now. An autopsy later today will determine the exact cause of death of one of Hollywood's rising stars, River Phoenix.
The press made the tragic event even worse. First, the paparazzi published a photo of Phoenix on an ambulance gurney. The next morning, the news station seemed to revel in the 911 call made by Joaquin. My brother's death has been spread across the world. The press has been heartless. It's entertainment to them. I had reporters in my face asking questions like, "How come you were so polite when you called 911? Heartless bastards. How do they even begin to know how I felt that night? This 911 call was sent into the radio and television. It was terrible. They photographed him in his coffin, and these hysterical girls who were at the funeral almost fell into the grave. Repulsive. It was a long time before I overcame this shock." The Phoenix family did the only thing that they could do. They disappeared from the media's radar and didn't show their faces in Los Angeles for more than a year. It wasn't until 1995 that Joaquin came back to Hollywood. He was responding to an invitation from Gus Van Sant. 4 years prior, the director had filmed My Own Private Idaho with River in the leading role. Later, he called on Rain Phoenix to perform in Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. And now, he was setting out to resurrect Joaquin's career with a film adaptation of the novel To Die For. Producers proposed Matt Damon for a leading role as well. To avoid rumors about favoritism or personal sympathy towards the Phoenixes, the director held open auditions and allowed his colleagues to select Joaquin first. Joaquin's co-stars were Matt Dillon, Casey Affleck, and Nicole Kidman. In the novel, the heroine jokes that if a movie is ever made about her, she wanted to be played by Tom Cruise's wife.
Who I strongly relate to because, you have similar physical traits.
Joaquin spent most of his days on set with Tom Cruise's wife. The actress and the director were both worried about the young man's shy nature. He would verbally berate himself between takes and avoid his colleagues. In one interview, Iris Burton's assistant stated that he had never met a person with a lower self-esteem. Nevertheless, Joaquin was given both the first sex scene of his career and dramatic sequences with Kidman.
James, do you think about me when we're not together?
All I do is think about you.
His interaction with Casey Affleck is also worth mentioning. The film gives Joaquin a best friend, and 8 years later they became relatives, and Affleck married Summer Phoenix.
I like it.
To Die For premiered in October of 1995, with the name Joaquin appearing at the end credits for the first time. The actor had abandoned his pseudonym as a way of marking a new phase of his career as an adult. After the failure of his Cowgirls film, Gus Van Sant had regained Hollywood's favor, basking in the rave reviews of the media along with the main characters. Kidman's performance received the highest praise, but critics also liked the frightening, lustful character of Joaquin.
See, nobody ever called me that before.
As had happened 6 years earlier, Iris Burton's office was drowning in scripts where Phoenix was cast as a vulnerable teen junkie. The actor brushed the offers aside without even reading them. He was just afraid of being typecast as he had been while suspended in midair on the set of Space Camp. So for the next year and a half, Joaquin didn't work. But it wasn't for lack of offers. Director Paul Thomas Anderson saw him as a replacement for Leonardo DiCaprio, who had rejected a role in Boogie Nights, but Joaquin's agent persuaded him to turn down the raunchy movie. Iris Burton was quite protective of Phoenix's reputation and believed that playing a drug-addicted porn actor was beneath him. For that same reason, he also didn't star in American History X. Joaquin's potential to play a dramatic role was obvious to everyone around him, but Burton saw him more as a hero lover.
Jeez, no one could be that much of a pushover.
She found her pupil a romantic role in the small melodrama Inventing the Abbots. This cinematic excursion into small-town 1950s America was memorable to audiences for a couple of unexpected plot twists, and to Phoenix for the first serious relationship of his life. Joaquin and Liv Tyler's romance began on set and would continue for another 3 years. Together, the couple left for Italy, where the actor modeled for a short time. By becoming the face of the Prada collection, he seemed to have accidentally turned a marketing ploy. Firstly, it enabled him to shed the image of the outsider that had followed him ever since his role in To Die For. Secondly, the media finally stopped comparing him to River. Joaquin was no longer referred to as the younger brother of that actor, and now he was one half of one of Hollywood's most popular couples. At the same time, he landed a minor role in the crime thriller U-Turn, where he worked with Sean Penn and Oliver Stone.
People around here call me TNT. You know why?
They're not very imaginative.
Because I'm just like Dynamite Boy, and when I go off, somebody gets hurt.
In the crime comedy Clay Pigeons, the plot was developed around Phoenix's character. Even though the actor liked the script, he doubted that the director would be able to effectively transfer a deadly combination of black humor and violence to the screen. But after meeting David Dobkin for the first time, he was sold. The debutant director had earned fame as a music video director, working with acts like Tupac, Coolio, and Elton John.
Wow.
This unique story, full of twists and creepy yet funny scenes, was Joaquin's boldest experiment. His chemistry with Vince Vaughn gave the film even more charm.
No, I'm not even sure that Anthony's a woman.
Well, of course it's a woman. It's got long hair.
Well, it could be a rock star. We don't fucking know what it is, do we?
The actors had come together because of financial problems, not their own, but those of the film. On the very first week, Joaquin's trailer was repossessed, and so for the rest of the days on set, he hung out in Vaughn's trailer.
Hell, man, you don't mind about that or nothing, do you?
Oh, hell no.
Phoenix was remembered by the film crew not only as a talented actor, but also as an ardent defender of nature. In one fishing scene, he refused to hook a fish. Before that, on a shoot for Prada, he wouldn't wear leather shoes. Perhaps every producer or director who's ever crossed paths with the actor has a similar tale to tell. So when Dobkin told Joaquin about his next project and offered him the role of a bullfighter, Phoenix replied that he would only do it if the bull emerged victorious from the fight.
You can't be serious.
While filming Clay Pigeons, Phoenix also received a role in Return to Paradise, a remake of the 1989 French thriller Force Majeure. In the film, the main characters face a difficult moral dilemma. Their friend has been detained for drug possession in Malaysia, where they had gone on vacation together. If they all return and stand trial, they will each receive 3 years in prison. If only one returns, then each person gets 6 years. And if no one comes back, the friend will be executed.
They were scared that I was gonna turn into strips and hang myself. So I said, hey guys, what do you think I'm paying you for?
Joaquin was eager to join the project. First of all, the character of Lewis was very different from anything he'd done before. And secondly, the main character of Return to Paradise was to be played by his friend Vince Vaughn.
It's cool, man. That's totally cool, Lou. Totally cool.
It was the bond between the actors that convinced director Joseph Rubin to choose Phoenix. The director didn't yet know that the eccentric actor's talent would nearly eclipse the film itself. Joaquin arrived for shooting having lost over 20 pounds, even though no one had asked him to. He also decided not to play a balanced character, but turned Lewis into a real person in a horrible situation. Instead of delivering the brave and wise lines from the script, he begged and sobbed. The performance put the audience behind bars, turning them into Lewis's cellmates. He was so extreme. At one point, he discussed getting a couple of tough guys, putting him in a room for a couple of days and roughing him up in the middle of the night to simulate what his character went through in Malaysia. But I was like, we don't need to do that. I ain't gonna put you through that.
I haven't been harmed anyway. I haven't been tortured.
Return to Paradise brought Joaquin another due portion of recognition. But in the 3 years since returning to Hollywood, he never starred in any big-budget studio films. Studios give plenty of praise to independent cinema, but if the name of the actor on the poster doesn't get the public's attention, then their talent is much less appreciated.
So?
If you want to work on meaningful projects, you have to act in commercially profitable films as well. It was for this reason that Phoenix's agents got him the role of Max California in Joel Schumacher's neo-noir thriller 8mm.
Well, what choices have I got?
Initially, the director wanted to make a cheap film with Russell Crowe and Mark Wahlberg in the lead roles, but the latter refused and the aspiring Australian actor was not yet taken seriously by studios. Joel then offered the role to Nicolas Cage, the same Cage who had conquered the box office and not the current king of Grindhouse. Nicholas agreed, and suddenly the film was a blockbuster with a $40 million budget. In the company of stars like Cage, Gandolfini, and Stormare, who were experiencing the golden age of their careers, Phoenix stood out like a sore thumb.
All right, Master, now I don't know what you're looking for, but so we're clear from the start. I'm straight.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
His role as an eccentric, mysterious punk, combined with Cage's rugged private detective, became a sort of noir version of Starsky and Hutch, with a touch of odd dark humor.
One guy sees it and pukes, another guy sees it and he falls in love.
The film brought in just under $100 million and added some weight to Joaquin's name on the poster.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
But his breakthrough performance wouldn't come until 1999, and Phoenix was already roaming from one site to another. The actor had agreed to star in the crime drama The Yards a year earlier. Aspiring director James Gray made him fall in love with a story about friends at the epicenter of a corruption scheme. James wrote the screenplay based on true events involving his own family.
If you take care of them, this business can take care of you.
Joaquin had become obsessed with the role and was as elated as the director when the film finally received funding.
He's been so loyal. Took us a while to get it up and running, but Joaquin was like the first actor to attach himself.
It was at this time that Phoenix had his first encounter with the ruthless world of agency tactics. His decision to turn down a role in Boogie Nights was coming back to haunt him. The film had captivated critics and made Mark Wahlberg famous. Mark also liked the script for The Yards and had agreed to play a supporting role. Agents took this opportunity to show the actor their level of influence on the film industry. They bid on behalf of the clients for the lead role. The director ultimately approved Wahlberg, but still kept Phoenix on the project. The whole thing was just an agency power play to show Mark Wahlberg how powerful they could be. Like, we can get that for you. In fact, Gray rewrote the script so that Joaquin's character had just as much screen time as the main character. Joaquin was also a great fit for the role of Willie Gutierrez. No matter how hard Phoenix tried to avoid it, he still received a typecast role. The truth was, Phoenix was just too good at playing outsiders, scoundrels, and introverts. In the yards, he fully embodied the role of a vile crook who only makes problems worse as he tries to solve them.
It's no big deal. I can take care of myself.
Joaquin and Mark were joined by James Caan, Ellen Burstyn, Faye Dunaway, and Charlize Theron. The latter got a real taste of Phoenix's acting tactics. In the film's climatic scenes, he didn't merely simulate a fight, he actually hit and shoved the actress.
Leave me alone!
In his commitment to realism, Joaquin also suggested to Wahlberg that they fight on screen. The actors beat each other for 2 takes, filmed by 3 cameras. The next day, they arrived on set so bruised up that they looked like a plum and an eggplant in a grade school play. To get into character for an emotional scene, Joaquin would bang his head against a wall off camera. Well, the media found out about this and began talking about the actor's nervous breakdowns. He replied that it was just one of 100 ways to get himself in the right mindset for a scene, because particularly difficult sequences require a special approach to properly convey the character's emotions. The freedom to improvise and make collective decisions helped James Gray create the film he wanted. Unfortunately, his vision didn't satisfy producer Harvey Weinstein. He thought the film was too gloomy and depressing.
Shut up.
He demanded that the final act be reshot and nearly half of the footage re-edited. Despite the fact that the director complied with the producer's wishes, Harvey delayed the film's release for 2 years and then only allowed a limited release in the year 2000. As a result, 8mm was postponed and the yards became a way for the producer to demonstrate his power. Moviegoers had forgotten what Joaquin looked like, but he continued to work non-stop. From the moment the script for Gladiator fell into the hands of Iris's assistant, Chris Snyder, agents went to war for the role of Commodus. Ridley Scott was a fan of Joaquin's work. He'd been impressed after seeing him in Clay Pigeons, a film produced by the Scott Brothers Company. Unfortunately, the director's approval wasn't enough. He hounded the studio for permission to film the first Roman epic in half a century. By the 1950s, audiences had become bored with the genre, causing production companies to shy away from investing in similar projects. The only thing that made studios consider taking the risk was the director's contribution to world cinema. They hadn't believed in Alien or Blade Runner either, but those turned out to be cult classics. On the other hand, every Ridley Scott project in the last 10 years had been a commercial failure.
That's unbelievable. Thank God times have changed.
Have they? The studio ultimately forked out the money for Gladiator, but on the condition that they had total creative control. Joaquin found himself on the battlefield with Ridley in the fight with DreamWorks. The bosses weren't impressed with Phoenix's audition. Not that they couldn't see Phoenix as the malicious, spoiled emperor of Rome, but Scott had already talked them into bringing Russell Crowe onto the project. If they were to add Joaquin as well, then there would be no star power names on the poster for the biggest blockbuster of the year. DreamWorks was leaning towards Jude Law, but his agents demanded that the actor be approved without an audition. Finding themselves in a stalemate, the studio's founder, Steven Spielberg, took Joaquin's side, perhaps out of a sense of nostalgia towards River, but more likely out of respect for Iris Burton, who'd been supplying talented children for Spielberg's films for 20 years. Thus, Joaquin Phoenix was approved for the most important role of his career. The signing of the contract coincided with his breakup with Liv Tyler. Joaquin's face wound up on the front pages of the tabloids. Luckily, his departure for the filming location in Malta saved the actor from hundreds of hungry paparazzi. After arriving on the island, he got to witness the greatness of cinema in all of its glory. On the first day of filming, the director focused on just a couple of B-roll shots. But there was nothing simple about them. Gigantic statues towered before Joaquin. People were riding by on camels, and all around him were about 150 extras dressed in ceremonial Roman armor.
How do I do? Who am I kidding? I'm from Florida. I'm gonna walk out and wave.
Obviously, Phoenix was a little intimidated by such a large-scale project. He even asked Russell Crowe to make fun of him in between takes. The Gladiator wasn't a fan of these methods. Russell later admitted that the only way he could relax his co-star was to employ the most sophisticated of acting techniques. Crowe and Richard Harris, who played Commodus's father, met with Joaquin after filming had wrapped for the day and got him drunk until he passed out. Phoenix was no longer shy in front of his co-stars and the film crew. On the contrary, he enhanced each take with his improv.
Am I not merciful?
This scream wasn't written in the script and actually terrified Connie Nielsen. In the scene where Marcus Aurelius is murdered, the actor believed in what was happening so much that he fainted as soon as Scott shouted cut.
Lament with me, brother. Our great father is dead.
Joaquin also wanted to intensify the changes that Commodus goes through. He envisioned his character taking the throne as a lean, ambitious young man, only to become a flabby, jaded emperor. I really wanted him to be the young prince-in-waiting and then become more disheveled as he becomes emperor and alter his physical appearance, because you leave that story for a few months and it becomes Russell's journey. So I put on some weight there.
I will give the people the greatest vision of their lives.
The only problem was Phoenix forgot to let the director in on his vision. While reviewing footage, Scott pointed out to his assistant that Joaquin appeared to be gaining weight. The assistant went to the actor's trailer and shouted through the door, "Ridley says you're fat."
And the Emperor was heartbroken.
Phoenix didn't eat for over a week after that and got back into shape. He didn't want to attract too much attention to himself because he'd already made life difficult for the costume designers by demanding that all the leather elements of his costumes be replaced with synthetic material. Phoenix's inner circle knew that a rolling gladiator was bound for an Oscar, but just one project a year often isn't enough. Past experience suggested that the award is given on the basis of cumulative merit. Robin Williams put in a couple of years' worth of fruitful work before being handed the trophy for Good Will Hunting. Kevin Spacey celebrated his victory for The Usual Suspects after also playing a psychopath in the thriller Seven that same year. Based on this logic, agents were in search of another opportunity for Joaquin. They found one in the biographical drama Quills. Once again, Phoenix found himself up against Jude Law for that role. And once again being selected thanks to Ridley Scott. The director released him from filming in Malta. Joaquin flew into London, auditioned, and transformed back into Commodus the very next day.
Striking story.
A couple of weeks later, he found out he'd landed the role. Upon completion of his work on Gladiator, Phoenix jumped right into filming for the next project.
Everyone has talents if we look for them.
Yes, I'm sure.
His first appearance on set captivated screenwriter Doug Wright. He had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth, and he'd had on these really intense aviator shades, and his hair was all tousled, and he was like, "Hey, dude." Then he walked onto the soundstage, and the cigarette gets stamped out, and the glasses come off, and someone runs a comb through his hair, and the guy is suddenly an early 19th century priest. It was the most transformative moment. It took my breath away. Joaquin is someone who could slide by you in a hallway, but aim a lens at him, and he becomes 30 feet tall. Phoenix was playing the most difficult character and still nearly overshadowed his co-stars. An impressive achievement considering he was in the company of professionals like Jeffrey Rush,
Yes, dear heart, it's true.
Kate Winslet, and Michael Caine. The multi-layered abbot runs the gamut of experiences. The character's true feelings are hidden from those around him. But Phoenix never lets the viewer forget about his secret desires.
The next time you feel the urge to visit the marquee, I hope you'll come to confession instead.
The media declares that Joaquin is pursuing an Oscar from 3 directions, 3 supporting roles, 3 contenders for Hollywood's biggest award. Indeed, in May of 2000, Gladiator is released. Worldwide recognition, commercial success, and universal acclaim are achieved, thanks in no small part to October reviews of The Yards, for which Phoenix receives plenty of praise. In January 2001, just before the Academy Awards ceremony, Quills premieres to a shower of compliments from critics.
Good. Very good.
Joaquin is nominated for his role as Commodus, and all he's left to do is put on a tuxedo and prepare an acceptance speech.
The Oscar goes to Benicio del Toro in Traffic.
Alas, he loses to Benicio del Toro, and now there is little doubt about his status as an A-list actor, or so it seems. In reality, Joaquin was now paying the price of working for a year and a half straight, with no breaks. His acting marathon has completely exhausted him, both physically and mentally. So when I finished that film, I was exhausted. I went straight home to my mum's. I sat in the bed for like 6 weeks and did absolutely nothing. A year before he applauded Benicio del Toro as he ascended the stage, Joaquin went on a press tour, where he gave interviews and appeared on evening talk shows. We're used to Hollywood actors making journalists laugh and joking with late-night hosts, but Phoenix's publicity seemed to be harming his star status. His responses were scattered, and he seemed shy in front of TV cameras. His colleagues were no help either. For example, Ridley Scott once described Joaquin as someone you feel sorry for no matter what happens to them on screen. Doug Wright has hinted at Joaquin's instability, and even his best friend Casey Affleck has introduced him as a guy who no one would believe flies first class. Fans were rather amused by his eccentric nature, but the actor seemed to be a problem for studios. Box office sales depend on successful advertising, and Phoenix's quirks weren't exactly creating long lines at the ticket booth. Joaquin's life was a roller coaster, with the high point being an Oscar nomination for the best film of the year, followed by a steep drop into a reality where he was the third or fourth choice for a role. He got close to being cast in Pearl Harbor, but Michael Bay ultimately went with Josh Hartnett, another product of Iris Burton.
I'm not sorry.
Then Phoenix was considered for the role of Wolverine in X-Men, but his aloofness was a deterrent to the producers of the blockbuster. The actor's next project was the inexpensive dark comedy Buffalo Soldiers.
Guys! What? Just letting you know, Parsons is dead.
Although describing the film's comedy as dark doesn't quite do its content justice, it's actually an immoral, violent, and offensive comedy that satirizes America's ideals. The US Army condemned the movie before the first frame was ever shot.
Perfect.
Filming took place at a military base in Germany that American troops had transferred to the Germans. The film is an adaptation of a novel by Robert O'Connor about a swindler named Ray Elwood who turns his army service into an illicit operation dealing in drugs and army supplies.
Uh-oh. Jackpot.
Scenes about Joaquin and Ed Harris mimic the style from the hit TV show MASH.
Amphetamines, traces of barbiturates, estrogen. Estrogen?
A birth control pill. He might have thought it was something else.
Well, fine, but he didn't take heroin, speed, and cocaine by mistake, did he?
It seems unlikely, sir.
With some added charm from Michael Pena and Anna Paquin. The film premiered at the Toronto Film Festival on September the 8th, 2001. This date should speak volumes about the movie's success. Just 3 days later, America would have a long-lasting breakup with films that mocked the military and patriotism. Because of the tragedy, the film's release in the United States was postponed for 2 years. But even that buffer wasn't enough to avoid controversy. In addition to provocations at press conferences, the advertising poster also received criticism. A smiling Joaquin is shown posing in front of an American flag, flashing a peace sign with the slogan, "Steal all that you can steal," above him. The phrase, which was considered a PR stunt, misfired, and the film flopped at the box office. But critics still praised the acting. Buffalo Soldiers is the last project that Iris Burton would find for Joaquin. Phoenix considered her a member of the family. Burton had visited their Florida home and given his brother and sisters a chance. However, Iris's tiny agency, which helped launch the careers of countless children and teens, couldn't handle the needs of the rising adult star. As further confirmation of this fact, as soon as Joaquin signed with Hollywood's largest talent agency, CAA, he landed the highest-paid role of his career.
Stimulating.
For his participation in the thriller Signs by M. Night Shyamalan, the studio was willing to pay $1 million. At that time, producers spared no expense in fulfilling the director's request. After The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, Touchstone Pictures knew that Shyamalan's next film was guaranteed to be a box office hit, and the director did not disappoint. The film kept audiences in a state of suspense from the very first scene, with performances by Joaquin and Mel Gibson shining a new light on the actors.
I would say so, yes.
Probably.
The famous birthday party scene, considered to be one of the most frightening in the history of cinema, packs a stronger punch thanks to the look of horror in Phoenix's eyes. The director appreciated his talent and immediately invited him to be in his next film. At the same time, Joaquin was only cast in Signs because Mark Ruffalo had been diagnosed with a brain tumor shortly before filming. Fortunately, it was benign.
I'm a miracle man.
While Phoenix was preparing for his upcoming role in The Village, he acted in the mysterious, if not strange, romance drama It's All About Love. Young Danish director Thomas Vinterberg shot a complex and sometimes violent art house film.
There's a dead man in front of us.
Just step over.
Step over him.
Alas, despite the Hollywood stars and sophisticated camera work, critics were not impressed. It will take another 15 years, a collaboration with Mads Mikkelsen and 3 Oscar nominations before they finally see his talent.
I don't quite follow you.
In addition to It's All About Love, in 2003, the animated family film Brother Bear was also released.
No, I mean I'm not a bear. I hate bears.
Well, gee, eh? You're one big beaver. Don't kid me.
Joaquin voiced the main character over the course of nearly 3 years, not because the script had so many lines, but because the studio would record short sessions as the animation was rendered and made available. Brother Bear did not make the list of successful family projects that year. It failed at the box office and received a lot of mediocre reviews, with praise reserved for the design, while the plot was panned.
Thanks for your wisdom.
In the fall of that year, Joaquin went to the Shyamalan training camp. The director insisted that the cast members immerse themselves in the realities of rural living. The group of Hollywood superstars learned how to build a fire, plow the ground, chop logs and thresh corn. This approach united the group and enhanced the sense of realism, 2 things the director reveled in. Over 300 people constructed the village, which was built especially for the film. All of the costumes were made from available materials in the area, just as the characters would have done. In pursuit of external ideals, the director lost track of miscalculations. In the script, a working version of the text hit the internet before filming had even begun. Thousands of Shyamalan fans were horrified by the final act and openly made fun of the dialogue. The wave of criticisms hit so hard that the director even changed the script. However, he left the plot twist unaltered. Upon its release, The Village was met with scathing reviews.
Why'd you tell me this blackness?
Nevertheless, the film was a hit at the box office, earning Joaquin his $4 million acting fee.
There are different types of love.
Another project that Phoenix had to physically train for was Ladder 49.
Your helmet!
He attended the Baltimore Fire Academy for a month and then joined the city's volunteer fire department. The other firemen initially nicknamed him Hollywood and treated him with disdain. But Joaquin was proactive and participated in responses to real calls. After being almost literally baptized by fire, people started calling him by his name and accepted him as an honorary member of the department. After experiencing real fires, the movie's special effects were child's play to the actor, although this is perhaps more to the credit of the explosives coordinator. During the planning phase, the film's creators decided not to use computer-generated graphics. Fire was deemed too unpredictable to simulate accurately, especially if it was playing a full-fledged character in the story. The special effects terrified the city of Baltimore. Flames were rising from out on the outskirts of town, causing concerned residents in the area to immediately dial 911. The emergency line received so many calls that a representative of the city's fire department went live on several radio stations to make the public aware of the situation and put their fears at ease. Director J. Russell successfully tackled the action scenes in Ladder 49, but overcooked the dramatic part of the narrative with a plot full of cliches and excessive sentimentality. The media denounced the attempt to play on the public's patriotic sentiment after 9/11. Joaquin received his fair share of criticism too. He wasn't liked by critics as the heroic boy next door.
What?
The only positive reviews went to the special effects and John Travolta, who critics considered a breath of fresh air in an otherwise stifling movie.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
The $60 million project was a box office flop. Phoenix's agents were just glad that 2004 had been the most productive year of their client's career, as the failure was quickly eclipsed by his next film.
We have heard reports of reprisal massacres. Will the UN intervene to stop the bloodshed?
Depicting the story of the Rwandan genocide was a desperate attempt to draw attention to the horrors that the global community was ignoring. While the UN was gaining influence in the Bosnian conflict and the US was recovering from its setbacks in Somalia, Rwanda was quietly drowning in blood. The Tutsi genocide had claimed the lives of 1 million people, and the world did not seem to notice. Director and screenwriter Terry George portrays the nightmare from the perspective of Paul Rusesabagina, a hotel manager who saved more than 1,000 lives. The film, with its documentary-like accuracy and impassivity, immerses the viewer in the terror of it all. In addition, some of the sequences being filmed in the capital of Rwanda, Kigali, the actors strove for authenticity. Don Cheadle spent weeks with Rusesabagina. Nick Nolte studied General Romeo Dallaire, and Joaquin spoke to cameramen who had covered the events from within the country. I met 3 different guys, and it was very insightful. It was difficult hearing their stories, and I think it was also very difficult for them to tell their stories. But we learned a lot about their experiences. These cameramen had covered 30 wars, but they said they'd never experienced anything like Rwandan genocide. Joaquin's character personifies an outsider's view of the situation. He sees the absurdity of the division between the Hutu and the Tutsi.
I am Tutsi.
And your friend, Tutsi?
No, I'm Hutu.
They could be twins.
And tells Paul about the apathy of the rest of the world.
They'll say, oh my God, that's horrible. And then go on eating their dinners.
The film shined a light on the tragedy and captivated audiences, but not without controversy. The president of Rwanda at the time accused Rusesabagina of being an ally of the Hutu regime. Paul Kagame claims that Paul had extorted money from the refugees and spied for criminals. Of course, these statements were only made after Rusesabagina openly criticized the current government. In 2020, he was arrested and accused of financing extremists. Paul refuses to assist in the investigation and argues that the trial violates his human rights. But let's go back on track. Even before Joaquin was cast in Hotel Rwanda, he was invited to a dinner which hinted at the role of a lifetime.
A little higher. Can I play the chord?
Gladiator fans Johnny and June Cash met with Phoenix at their estate, and a couple of months later, the actor received the script for the biographical drama Walk the Line.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Like the country music legend, director James Mangold had been impressed with Phoenix's portrayal of Commodus and saw him as the perfect candidate to play Cash. At the same time, the director and actor agreed that the casting was not related to the parallels between his and his characters' lives, although Cash had also lost his older brother. I think people have an idea of what my experience is, and they think that's what it is. But it's not. My experience is very different from John's. I think there's a vast difference with your understanding of life and death when you're 10 years old to when you're 18. Johnny and June personally approved the candidates for the leading roles. Reese Witherspoon was chosen to be Joaquin's partner.
Hi folks, how y'all doing again?
There was just one problem. Neither of them sang or played instruments.
Well, what's wrong with the way I sing?
To help the actors fit the part, Phoenix and Witherspoon were handed over to legendary guitarist T-Bone Burnett. For more than 6 months under his guidance, Joaquin and Reese honed their vocal skills and mastered the guitar and auto-harp. It was an extremely difficult time, full of arguments and nervous breakdowns. However, at the very beginning of their journey, Joaquin and Reese had made a pact that they would star in the film together. If one of them was replaced, the other would also leave.
You mind?
No, not at all.
Additionally, Mangold advised the actors not to copy Cash and Carter, but to create their own interpretation of them. As a result, every musical number in the film is performed in front of a live audience.
Well, when she wrapped her loving arms around my neck on the dance floor at Chelsea's bar, I should have turned her away, but how was I to say? I was firing, she was gasoline, good God. I was firing, she was gasoline.
Mangold gave the actors complete creative freedom during filming. While performing songs, they based their actions on the circumstances of the plot. Johnny's stare and June's response are improvised. Joaquin later recalled that he was shocked by Reese's reaction because he'd been trying as hard as he could to get her to lose control.
I got chains around my feet. Yeah, I got...
Another unscripted scene is Cash's emotional breakdown, where Phoenix tears the sink out of the wall and wrecks the dressing room. Joaquin was so committed to the role that not only did he replicate his character's musical achievements, but also his bad habits. The actor spent months drinking a bottle of whiskey every night. This radical acting method led him to voluntarily checking himself into rehabilitation. It was really more of a country club that didn't serve booze. You fall into routines, but I didn't want to go out and feel I have to fucking drink just to be okay with going to a restaurant. Johnny and June Cash passed away before the film's premiere. The director decided to pay them a special tribute. On the 38th anniversary of Cash's famous performance, Walk the Line was shown to the inmates of Folsom Prison in the very same room.
My hat's off to you now, because I ain't never had to drink this yellow water you got here at Folsom.
The film won over audiences beyond the correctional facility as well. Revenue from ticket sales nearly reached $200 million, in addition to the film picking up awards and nominations along the way.
Who'd ever thought that I'd win in the comedy or musical category? Not expected.
Joaquin lost the award for Best Actor to Philip Seymour Hoffman, but Reese Witherspoon celebrated victory.
And I want to say thank you to Joaquin Phoenix, who...
The new surge in fame didn't pay dividends for Phoenix. Instead, he relived his experience with Gladiator, taking a year-long hiatus from acting following the award ceremony. During this break, the documentary Earthlings is the only project featuring Joaquin to hit the screen, with him as narrator.
Humans, therefore, being not the only species on the planet, share this world with millions of other living creatures as we all evolve here together.
This shocking and horrifying story of animal abuse is the only project in the actor's career that he says could change the planet. The lives of everyone who has seen Earthlings is divided into before and after. After watching the documentary, tens of thousands of people stopped eating meat, and some even joined the fight for animal rights. However, the vegan community denounced the number of violent shots and the lack of reasoning behind the film's use of intimidation over enlightenment.
It is the human Earthling who tends to dominate the Earth, oftentimes treating other fellow Earthlings and living beings as mere objects.
Joaquin returned to the big screen in the fall of 2007. The action thriller We Own the Night, directed by James Gray, is the first on-screen collaboration between Phoenix and Mark Wahlberg since the release of The Yards 7 years earlier.
What's the matter, Joe? Nothing. It's kind of weird seeing you. Yeah, I know.
The director takes a typical plot about a battle between the mafia and the police and embellishes it with an original selection of actors. The dynamic between the two main characters, the perfect casting of Robert Duvall and Eva Mendes, and the inclusion of Russian actors like Oleg Taktarov and Yelena Solovay to play Russian characters, are what makes the film unique.
Hi, Kalina.
It combines predictable plot developments with original decisions by the director. For example, the car chase scene. Gray reviews hundreds of films and found a way to surprise audiences. The viewer watches the pursuit from a first-person perspective, making the special effects and car crashes barely noticeable. Like Joaquin's character, the audience feels as if they don't have time to pay close attention to them. The director also took advantage of the chemistry between Wahlberg and Phoenix. He wrote the characters specifically for the actors and even had them stage another fight, although this time they did it without hurting each other. Instead, Joaquin's true on-set victim was Robert Duvall. To get into character for their scenes together, the actor would bully and curse at his older co-star. He was always invading my space on camera. I think it was a device they had to get me a little irritated. It kind of worked in a way.
Disgusting. You're uncontrollable, you know?
The fact that James Gray no longer worked with Harvey Weinstein meant that he retained the rights to the final cut. Despite the film's lackluster reviews, criticizing its pretentious dialogue and comparing it to cheap film noir of the 50s, it paid off at the box office.
Either you're gonna be with us, or you're gonna be with the drug dealers.
I'll see it.
Joaquin continued his streak of reunions in 2007 on a new project with Terry George, director of Hotel Rwanda. In Reservation Road, the director tells the story of a personal crisis that's just as horrifying as that of the government.
The vehicle that struck your son was traveling from that direction. Is that correct, sir?
Phoenix and Mark Ruffalo play two fathers on opposing sides of the barricades. One is looking for his son's killer, while the other is looking for the strength to confess to the murder. George filmed the heartbreaking scene simultaneously from several different angles. This allowed the actors to perform as they would on stage and give their all in every scene, even if the shot didn't make the cut in post-production.
That's where Josh was hit.
Jennifer Connelly would go on to call this the most difficult film of her career, while critics would write entire newspaper columns praising the performances of the three main characters. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the only thing that journalists admired. They contrast the masterful acting with a plotline full of coincidences and accidents that undermine the viewer's ability to believe in what's happening on the screen.
Mr. Arno?
What brings you here?
Oh, my daughter takes piano lessons from Mrs. Weldon.
The film performs disastrously at the box office, subsequently depriving the director of a decade of theatrical film releases.
No, that's a good movie. Underrated.
Phoenix was also approaching an extended career break, but before doing so, he managed to once again team up with James Gray. In Two Lovers, breakdancing takes the place of gunfights and brawls. The director experiments with a new genre of romantic drama, where Joaquin once again exceeds his wildest expectations. In a love triangle with the characters of Vanessa Shaw and Gwyneth Paltrow, the actor portrays a quivering and vulnerable introvert.
I fell into the bay. It's cold. Oh, come on, stop. I'm
You
fine.
fell into the bay?
It's not gonna happen again, don't worry.
Scenes with Isabella Rossellini, who plays the protagonist's mother, emerge as a masterpiece in their own right.
We don't care about that. You know that.
The film will be called the best of Phoenix's career.
Thank you.
But that will be forgotten on the day of the premiere. On the red carpet, Joaquin will announce that he's giving up acting.
This will be my last performance as an actor. I'm not doing films anymore.
To begin his career as a rapper.
Got the homeboy Joaquin Phoenix, but the kicks a rap for y'all one time. Let's go, bro.
Mike, Jordan, give me the rock and I'm scoring. Hey, came from the bottom, that's scoring. I swear that I'm up for the sun in the morning. Oof, hey, I gotta flex. I need a Nike bag, give me the check. I need the money and power, respect, but I promise I'm repping the O to the dead. Hey, oof, I told him out of my way. I don't got nothing to say.